Welcome, focused learners. If you've ever sat in the back of a massive, dimly lit lecture hall, literally fighting the urge to check your phone while a professor just talks at you for an hour, yeah, you already know the traditional educational model is struggling. It's kind of broken. But there's a massive shift happening right now in global higher education. We're moving away from those passive lectures and towards dynamic, active learning. Okay, let's dive into this and explore the actual data, the classroom strategies, and the global movements that are completely reshaping how we learn.
Here is our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to cover 1. The active learning revolution. 2. Specific strategies for the classroom. 3. Redesigning the physical space. 4. Global tech and policy. And finally, overcoming cultural resistance. We have a lot of ground to cover, from hard data and micro-level tactics to macro-level global architecture, so let's get right into it.
Section 1. The Active Learning Revolution.
Before we look at the global landscape, we really need to nail down what exactly we mean when we throw around the buzzword active learning. According to the framework from the Johns Hopkins University Center for Teaching and Learning, it's essentially any experience that requires student participation beyond just passively listening and taking notes. It's all about engagement. It forces the learner into the driver's seat, asking you to synthesize information, evaluate data, and solve problems in real time. But why make this massive shift? Well, the data is actually pretty staggering.
So the crucial point is this. A massive meta-analysis out of Harvard University looked at 225 different research studies in STEM classes. What they found was that students engaged in active learning performed 6% better on exams than those stuck in traditional lectures. But honestly, here's the shocking part. Students in traditional passive lecture classes were 1.5 times more likely to fail. I mean, think about that. The traditional lecture is literally leaving students behind.
When we look at this through the lens of Bloom's taxonomy, the difference becomes incredibly clear. Traditional lectures, they're great at hitting those basic knowledge objectives, just recalling facts, but they hit a brick wall right there. Active learning, on the other hand, pushes students way up into higher-order cognitive objectives, application, synthesis, and evaluation. You aren't just memorizing some formula, you're actually debating its application and testing its absolute limits.
Section 2. Strategies for the classroom.
Now that we understand the why, let's move to the how. How do instructors actually deploy this stuff without the classroom descending into total chaos? Well, the good news is you don't actually have to scrap your entire syllabus to use active learning. Researchers note that student attention naturally drops off after just 15 minutes of a lecture. 15 minutes. To combat that, instructors can use 5-minute student active breaks. We're talking about techniques like think, pair, share, roundtables, quick case studies. These quick little pivots allow students to refocus, process what they just heard, and completely reset their attention spans.
And this brilliantly illustrates one of the most effective, structured techniques out there, the jigsaw method. It's like a giant puzzle. Students start in a home group. Each person gets assigned a specific piece of a really complex topic. Then they leave their home group to go meet up with ambassadors from other groups who have that exact same piece. They become experts together, and then, here's the magic, they return to their original home group to teach it to their peers. It beautifully structures peer-to-peer learning, making sure absolutely everyone is accountable and active.
Section 3. Redesigning the physical space.
Let's zoom out slightly. You can have the absolute best teaching strategies in the world, but if your physical environment is fighting you, they just won't thrive. Seriously, if you try to do a jigsaw exercise in a giant auditorium where the seats are literally bolted to the floor facing forward, yeah, it's going to be incredibly awkward. Universities are waking up to this. Take Washington University, for example. Heavily inspired by the scale-up model from NC State, they have radically redesigned their rooms. They use tech pods with local monitors for digital collaboration, round tables for continuous group work, and flex spaces filled with rolling tablet chairs so the whole geometry of the room can change in a matter of seconds. They are breaking down that restrictive, instructor at the front paradigm.
But here is the catch. Spatial and course design must perfectly match learner readiness. A really fascinating case study from Seoul National University proves this point. They compared flipped learning, which is where students watch lectures at home and do the homework in class, across two completely different subjects. In their foundational Calculus 2 course, which you see on the left, freshmen needed highly structured, instructor-led problem solving. But jump over to their advanced nonlinear system theory course for grad students on the right, and that space thrived on open debates and student-led presentations. Basically, one size absolutely does not fit all.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the friction these new models can sometimes create.
Look, when students are asked to do pre-class work, like watching a super complex video lecture loaded with slides, a talking head video, and a bunch of annotations all at the exact same time, their cognitive load just maxes out. As you can see here, it becomes highly burdensome. If those pre-class materials aren't totally streamlined, students experience what researchers call extraneous cognitive load, and that leads directly to pushback, serious fatigue, and ultimately lower performance.
Section 4. Global Tech and Policy.
Let's zoom out even further to the macro level. How are entire nations restructuring their higher education systems to mandate these active frameworks? Because what we're seeing globally is that this isn't just a bottom-up movement of a few enthusiastic teachers anymore. It's being mandated from the top down by nations wanting to maintain their economic competitiveness. For example, Singapore uses the Teach Less, Learn More policy. Estonia is pushing a digital-first lifelong learning strategy. South Korea uses special legislation to free elite universities like KAIST from strict bureaucracy. And China? They've mandated the Gold Courses initiative. Impartially speaking, these 4 state-driven frameworks all share one massive goal: aligning university output directly with 21st century labor market needs.
Let's move to Sambalay and see how this builds over time, using Singapore's strategic evolution as a prime example. I mean, they didn't just do this overnight. It started way back in 1997 when the Thinking Schools policy was launched, actively pivoting away from rote memorization. Fast forward to 2005, they refined this focus with Teach Less, Learn More, literally telling educators to cut the fluff to make room for active inquiry. By 2015, this evolved into massive architectural shifts. Nanyang Technological University actually opened The Hive, which is an entire building with 56 smart classrooms, specifically designed for flipped cohort-based learning.
Meanwhile, over in Estonia, they're leveraging their world-class digital infrastructure to support learners based exactly on their entry levels. Look at this data from Tallinn University of Technology. It shows a really stark GPA gap in first-year IT students. You've got complete beginners sitting at a 3.21 versus those with prior programming experience at a 3.56. Because early struggles are a huge predictor of dropout rates, Estonia heavily utilizes active AI simulations, gamification, and cloud-based mobile learning. It's all designed to scaffold those novice students, turning passive frustration into active, supported problem-solving.
Over in China, the transition is guided by top-down centralized quality standards. The Ministry of Education's initiative sets out to establish what they call Gold Courses, courses that strictly mandate higher-order cognitive goals and active learning. At the same time, they are actively eliminating low-rigor, easy-to-pass water courses. And to support this massive transition, institutions like Tsinghua University are utilizing cutting-edge artificial intelligence. They even use an AI-driven student growth assistant named Queen Xiaoda, just to ensure classrooms remain highly engaging and suitably challenging.
Section 5. Overcoming cultural resistance.
Of course, implementing these systems globally isn't totally seamless. Actually, scratch that. It's really hard, because new pedagogical models often clash with deeply ingrained human behaviors and cultural norms. Take many Confucian heritage cultures across East Asia, for example. The transition to loud, debate-heavy active learning faces some unique sociocultural friction. 2 major concepts are at play here. First is menzu, or face-saving. It's this intense pressure to protect one's academic reputation, which makes students incredibly reluctant to speak up or voice incomplete thoughts. If they aren't 100% sure, they're right. Second is the teacher as pedestal dynamic, where the instructor is revered as the sole source of truth. That leads some students to view peer-to-peer discussion as, well, kind of a waste of time. And all of this often results in what researchers call classroom silence.
But here's the thing. These cultures aren't inherently passive. The method just needs to adapt to those collectivist values. Institutions like Duke NUS Medical School in Singapore navigate this brilliantly, using team-based learning, or TBL. It works like this. First, students take an individual readiness test. Then, they take the exact same test as a group, discussing it in a super low-stakes environment. Finally, a collective team answer is presented to the class. If the answer is wrong, the whole team shares the responsibility. It completely neutralizes that individual face-saving anxiety by making the whole team responsible for public answers.
So, from the physical geometry of our desks to the digital bandwidth of our pre-class materials, right down to the cultural psychology of how we answer a question in public, learning is evolving. The old-school, passive reception of information is simply no longer enough to thrive in the modern world. Which leaves us with one final, vital question to reflect on. If the traditional lecture is obsolete, is your classroom ready for the future? Thanks for exploring this explainer with me today. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.